Alright, ladies and gentlemen. Back again. Let's get this show on the road.
Meant that they believed that a duly reported epidemic of massacres of peacefully inclined people, over whom the American flag was floating as a symbol of protection to life and property, had stood effectually checked by November 1, 1904, the date of the report, and first, of the massacres themselves, their nature and extent. The summer massacres of 1904 began with what we all call down there, the outbreak of July 10. In August 1904, I went to Samar to handle the cases arising out of the disturbances there, assisted by the native governor of the province, who, under the law already alluded to, was ex officio sheriff of the court, and an army of deputy sheriffs, as it were, the constabulary, numbering several hundred. The outbreak of July 10th was always known afterwards as the Town Affair. This Town Affair was a raid by an outlaw band on the barrio of Taran, one of the hamlets of the municipal jurisdiction of the township called Gondara, in the valley of the Gondara River, in north-central Samar, wherein 100 houses, the whole settlement, were burned, and 21 people killed. The term of court lasted from early in August until early in November. The day after the Taran Affair, over on the other fork of the Gondara River, occurred what was called the Cantiguic Affair. Cantiguic was a hamlet or barrio about the size of Taran. The brigands killed the lieutenant of police of Cantiguic and some others, but they did not kill everybody in the place. Instead, after killing a few people, they went to the tribunal, town hall, seized the local tenient, or municipal representative of American authority, tied the American flag they found at the tribunal about the head of the tenient, turban, fashion, poured kerosene oil on it, and took the tenient downstairs and out into the public square, where they lighted and burned the flag on his head. The chief of the band, one Giuliano Cacicoy by name, remarking to the onlookers that the act was intended as a lesson to those serving that flag. They then cut off the lips of the tenient, so he could not eat. He of course died a little later, burned the barrio and carried off 50 of the inhabitants. Cacicoy was captured sometime afterward, and I sentenced him to be hanged. There was practically no dispute about the facts. After the Cantiguic Affair, during the term of court mentioned, the provincial doctor, Dr. Cullen, an American who had been a captain doctor of volunteers, had occasion to run up to Manila. The doctor was a most accomplished gentleman, but he had a fondness for the gruesome. In description equal to Edgar Allan Poe himself, after he came back he told me about having told the Governor General of the Cantiguic Affair, and repeated with an evident, pleased consciousness of his ability to make his ears feel fertile, how the Governor had said to him slowly, Doctor, that is awful. Blood seemed to whet the appetite for slaughter. The records of the August-November 1904 term of the court of first instance of Samar show all the various barrios of the Gondara Valley in flames on successive days after the affairs of July 10th and 11th. I do not speak from memory, but from documents contained in a large bundle of papers kept ever since, in memory of that incarnate epoch. You find one barrio burned one day and another day, until all the people of the Gondara Valley were made homeless. One of the constabulary officers, Lieutenant Bowers, a very gallant fellow, testified before me that from July 10th to the date of his testimony, which was on court, about September 28th, some 50,000 people had been made homeless in Samar by the operations of the outlaws. I deem Lieutenant Bowers's estimate quite reasonable. His figures include only 1/5 of the population of an island which was in the throes of an all-pervading brigand uprising. The conservative nature of Lieutenant Bowers's estimate concerning the mischief that had already been wrought by the end of September 1904 and was then gathering destructive potentiality like a forest or prairie fire may be inferred from the contents of a memorandum appearing below, furnished me by a Spanish officer of the constabulary, a Lieutenant Calderon, who had been an officer of the rural guard in the Spanish days. It contains a list of 53 towns, villages, and hamlets. A barrio may be quite a village, sometimes even quite a town, though usually it is a hamlet, burned up to the date the memorandum was furnished me. In order to a clear understanding of these Samar massacres and town burnings of 1904, as well as for general geographical purposes, a few preliminary words of explanation will be appropriate just here. A province in the Philippines has heretofore been likened to a county, with us. But in the largest provinces, the subdivisions of provinces, called municipalities, are more like counties. And each municipality is in turn subdivided into sections called barrios. A municipality, Spanish, pueblo, in the Philippines is not primarily a city or town, as we understand it, i.e. a more or less continuous settlement of houses and lots more or less adjacent, but a specific area of territory, a township, as it were. This area or territory may be 5, 10 square miles, or 10 times 20, or more, or less. For example, Samar's area is 50 to 76 square miles. It is contained in 1904, and probably still contains only 25 townships or municipalities all told, each municipality being subdivided and turned into barrios. Municipalities in the Philippines vary in size as much as counties do with us, and their total area accounts for and represents the total area of the province, just as the total area of the counties of a state represents, with us, the total area of the state. The seat of government of the municipality always bears the same name as the municipality itself, just as the county seat of a county usually, or frequently, bears the same name as the county. With us, take for instance, the name of the first municipality or township in the list which appears below, Gondara. The municipality of Gondara might be described by analogy as the county of Gondara. The list of areas burned as a list of towns and villages of the county of Gondara. The municipality of Gondara included a watershed in north-central Samar, from which the Gondara River flowed in a southwesterly direction to the sea. Within this watershed, parallel 12½ north of the equator, intersects the 125th meridian of longitude east of Greenwich. Northern Samar is a very rich hemp country, Qatar being usually quoted higher than any hemp listed in the London market. If you stand at the highest point of the Gondara watershed, you can see 4 streams flowing off north, northwest, northeast, and southwest to the sea. There are some half-dozen streams having their source there. Brigands making their headquarters there could always, when hard-pressed, get away in canoes toward the sea in almost any direction they wished. The following is Lieutenant Calderon's list. Relación por municipios de los barrios quemados. List by municipalities of the barrios burned. Municipality of Gondara. Time July 10, Cantagüe July 12, Kelman July 13, Arenas July 16, Blanca Aurora July 19, Balao 432 July 21, Cazaro August 8, Cachababago August 8, Hueva August 10, Hernandez August 10, San Miguel August 10, Buao August 15, Elcano August 17, San Enrique August 20, San Luis August 25. Municipality of Catbalocan. Calderon's list of barrios burned continued. Malino July 31, Salanga August 9, Ginga August 13, San Fernando August 15, Maragadan August 20, Telinga August 21, Santa Cruz August 22, Dap August 29, Palencia August 31, Albalate, date not given, Villa Hermosa, date not given. The above list of villages burned in the township of Catbalocan shows how bold the Pelagans had then grown. By that time they were committing depredation, robbery, murder, and town burning in all the various villages within the municipal jurisdiction of the township of Catbalocan, coming often within a few miles of the town proper of Catbalocan itself, the seat of the provincial government. In the attack on Salanga, which occurred August 9th, a number of people were killed. Salanga was but little more than an hour's walk from the courthouse at Catbalocan. The governor at once wired Manila as follows. Catbalocan, Samar, Aug. 9, 1904. Executive Secretary, Manila. The peacefully inclined people of the barrios near here are collecting here in large numbers, terrorized by Pelagians who are boldly roaming the country, burning barrios within 7 or 8 miles from Catbalogan. They kill men, women, and children without distinction. These Pelagians have fled from Gondara where they are being actively pursued by constabulary. All forces that could be spared have gone out. We have about 30 available fighting men here. Pelagian is liable at any time to enter Catbalogan. We are in danger of some occurrence. Quite a series, says the sewer guy. Affair 433. There are buildings here which I must protect at all hazards. Treasury, provincial jail with 95 prisoners, and commissary and ordnance stores of constabulary. We need at least 300 men, scouts if possible, to handle situation between here and Gondara. Pelagians undoubtedly have friends in Catbalogan. I suspect certain of the municipal authorities here. I estimate number of Pelagians now operating at about 500. Signed, Fido, Governor. On September 2nd, the provincial governor of Samo sent to Manila the following telegram. Catbalogan, Sept. 2, 1904. Carpenter, ACTG, X, Sassy Palace, Manila. 7:30 this evening. Simultaneous reports from north and south sides of town. Pelagians approaching. They have not entered yet and may not, but have gathered Americans with wives and children in my house. Arms supplied. Treasury 25,000 florins, 434, 140 prisoners in jail. Only 47 constabulary here. If Pelagians enter much nucleus, sacrifice life Pacific citizens here. Feel sure Pelagians have friends in Catbalogan. Request company leader scouts or soldiers from Calpio stationed here, preferably former. Their presence guarantees stability. Signed, Fido, Governor. Of course, Governor Fido did not call for the regular army of the United States. His job, poor devil, was to demonstrate that he could that the military were not needed. He would at once have been suspected of trying to settle the ship of the 9 civil government if he had admitted that the regular army was needed, but to return to Calderon's list. Municipality of Calderon 435. Calderon's list of leaders continues. Ilo August 17, Natural August 17, Ballot August 17. Municipality of Wright. Calderon's list of areas burned, continued. Ginica and July 25, Calapi July 28, Bonga August 4, Tutubigan August 19, Mating September 1, Lao and October 10, San Jose, date not given. A sample of the distressing communication I was given as these massacres progressed is a notification of the Mating affair. September 1st set forth below, which I give as a type of the methodical stoicism of those bloody times. Mating was 7 miles down the coast road from Catbalogan. In the district of Mating, municipality of September 1st, 1994. In the district of member of the village council, there being also present the president of the Municipal Board of Health, MR, Tomas San Pablo, and the principal men of the place. There has this day occurred the burial of the corpses, victims of the Pelagians, in the cemetery of this place, to wit, the officer of volunteers, Rafael Rosales, and the following volunteers: Visco Alberto Gabain, Juan Pickle, Dionisio Desno, Pedro Dantanin, Carmelo Lagbo. Also the 2 women, Eustaquia Zapadin and Apollinaria, and also one unknown Pelagian. This, in fulfillment of the official letter of instructions No. 136, from the office of the president of the town of Wright dated today, said burial ceremonies were conducted by the Reverend Father Marcos Gomez, and were attended by the whole volunteer force of this place because of the death of their officer Rosales. Tomas San Pablo, president of the Board of Health. Peregrine Alfano, councillor. Illegible, Moro, captain of volunteers, 436. Fancy having documents like the foregoing handed you with ever-increasing regularity as you sauntered, morning after morning, from your bath to your coffee and rolls, preparatory to the daily consisting of incidents such as that which included the burning of the American flag on the head of the municipal representative of American authority already mentioned, and other like acts of poor, misguided peasants stirred up by trifling scams representing the dregs of insurrection. Martin was not only within 7 miles of the courthouse at Catbalogan, but it was so near to Camp Bumpus, over in Late, where the 18th Infantry lay, that in order to them to meet in the morning would have made life and property in all that friggin' arid region safe at night and continuously thereafter. General W.M. H. Carter, Major General D.S., a well-known to the American public as the able officer who, in 1911, commanded the United States forces mobilized on the Mexican border during the Mexican Revolution of that year, that ousted President Diaz and seated President Madero, was in command at the time, the fall of 1904, of the military district of the Philippines, which included Samar and Leyte. A word of request to him would have made life definitely safe in all the coast towns and their vicinity within 2 or 3 days after receipt of such a request. Besides Guandara, Catbalogan, Campeonac, and Ryan, Lieutenant Calderon's list included the trio of ill-fated municipalities set forth below, concluding with the illustrious name of Taft. Municipality of Catubig. Poblacion September 5, Tagabling August 11, San Vicente August. Catubig was toward the north end of Samar on the day of the burning and sacking of the Poblacion of Catubig, September 5th, which was done by a force of several hundred Pelagians, the Spartan constabulary, so it was afterward reported, killed 100 of the Catubig Pelagians in an engagement. If this report were correct, as is likely, it was the biggest single killing of natives since the early days of the insurrection, 437, but it did not in the least check the Pelagian insurrection, which simply swerved its fury from the Catubig region toward the coast, the Pacific coast, descending upon the towns, villages, and hamlets of the townships of Brongan and Taft. Thus, Municipality of Brongan. Calderon's list of areas burned continued. Cepo
What is
Sept, 23, Luxihong Sept, 23, Maybrook Sept, 23, Maydulong Sept, 23, Sorda Sept, 23, Bucas Oct, 10, Punta Maria Oct, 10, Canjueli Oct, 11. Municipality of Taft. Calderon's list continued. Del Remedio Sept, 22, San Julian Sept, 22, Nina Sept, 22, Libas Sept, 22, Pagbabanan Sept, 22, San Vicente Sept, 21, Gino Lasso Oct, 3. Of the 25 pueblos or townships of Samar, the Calderon list only pretended to throw light on events in 9 of them, those being the only ones from which definite news had been reached headquarters. But as a reign of terror prevailed all over Samar at the time, the rest may be imagined, though it can never be ascertained. Of these 9, the last 2 were Municipality of Lorente, Pagbabalang Sept, 23, Municipality of Oros, Concepcion Sept, 23, Jipapad. Now it feels just as uncomfortable to be billowed in Pagbabalang as it would in a place with a more pronounceable name, and the same is true of the comparatively mellifluous Jipapad. True, some of these places were mere hamlets of 20 to 40 houses, but you may be sure there were 5 or 6 people, on an average, to each house. On the other hand, glance back again at the list of towns of the township of Taft that were sacked and burned, and consider that San Julian was about the size of the provincial capital, Catbalogan, and that Catbalogan, the town proper, contained a population of 4,000. Though looked at from the amphitheater of hills which surround it, Catbalogan does not look like such a very large group of houses. Filipino houses are usually full of people. It is easier to live that way than to build more houses. After the Pelagian descent on Lorente, the people of Lorente all went off to the hills to the Pelagians for safety. They were not allowed to have firearms. This was forbidden by law, except on condition of making formal application for permission, getting it finally approved, and giving a bond, conditions which, in practical operation, made the prohibition all but absolute. the law was general for the whole archipelago. The theory of the law was that the inhabitants were under the peace and protection of a benign civil government. The real reason of the law was that if the people were allowed to bear arms, it was very uncertain which side they would use them on, our side or the other. But by 1904, the lowland and coast people of Samar would have been glad enough to have stuck to us and gone out after the mountain robber bands had rearmed them, left unprotected, of being seen to spread in many places that about the only thing to do to be safe was to depart from under the protection of the American flag and take to the hills and join, or seem to join, the uprising. Toward the last of September, the provincial treasurer of Samar, an American, A.M.R. Whittier, visited the east coast of Samar, including Taft. On October 5th, he stated before me as follows. All the presidents that I have talked with, and this man Hill, 438, said that they wanted some protection for their towns, except at Blondin there are no guns in the hands of the municipal police. 439. This band near Taft was said to have 19 guns, and they thought they could not defend their towns with spears. Against these guns, there were reported to be between 200 and 600 in operation on the coast at that time, and they felt that they could not defend their towns with the means at hand. I found at Taft that they had taken all the records of the municipality and the money and taken it over to an island away from the main coast in order to protect their money and their records, and I understand the same thing was done at Lorente. At Oras, they had practically decided to take the things that could become necessary. All of the commercial houses on the east coast and a large number of people congregated at Blondin, which was safe on account of the protection of the constabulary. And the constabulary there were doing very good work, doing everything they could for the small boys, and they, the President felt that if they had guns in hand of the municipal police, or if they had the constabulary to guard their towns, they could go out after these people themselves. The importance of all this testimony, relatively to its forever sickening anyone acquainted with it with the colorization by the Republic, is that a transcript of M.R. Whittier's statement of October 5th was placed in the hands of the Governor General a few days later by M.R. Harvey, the Assistant Attorney General, and yet the situation continued until shortly after the presidential election. Several years afterwards, in the North American Review, Judge Rice, who was vice governor in 1904, after admitting that he was in constant consultation with the Governor General all through that period, by way of showing his opportunities for knowing whereof he spoke, denied that the failure to order out the military to protect the people from massacre had any relation whatever to the presidential election then going on in the United States. M.R. Whittier also stated before me that the total population of the municipality of Taft was 18,000, and that 25 men armed with guns in each of the 4 principal villages thereof that were burned would have prevented the destruction of those villages, so we did not protect the people, and we would not let them protect themselves. I do not select the Pueblo of Taft on account of its distinguished name. What's in a name? The fate of Taft and its inhabitants was simply typical of the fate which descended upon scores of other places, in dark and bloody Samar between the outbreak of July 1904 and the presidential election of November 8th of that year, and between those 2 dates the shadow of such a fate was over all the towns of the island on which it did not in fact descend. M.R. Whittier stated to me informally that at the time he was speaking of in the above formal statement, there were pending and had been pending for a long time. He seemed to think there must have been pigeonholed applications for permission to bear arms from 15 different people. After M.R. Whittier had finished his statement, the president of Taft made a like statement on the same day, October 5th. My retained copy shows that this official bore the ponderous name of Angel Custodio Christ logo. He declared a willingness to lead his people against the Pelagians if given guns, though the fervent soul did qualify this martial remark by adding, if I am well enough, explaining that the presidential body was subject to rheumatism. M.R. Christ logo stated among other things that there have been 800 houses burned in the jurisdiction of Taft before he left the East Coast for Catalonia about a week before, like M.R. Whittier's. A copy of M.R. Logo's statement was delivered a few days later to the Governor General in person by the Assistant Attorney General, M.R. Harvey, who had been present when it was made and taken down. This M.R. Harvey need not be, to the Western Hemisphere reader, a mere nebulous and typical entity, as the Hun, Angel Custodio Christ Logo, might. He is a very live American, a very high-toned gentleman, and an excellent lawyer, and was at last account still with the insular government of the Philippine Islands, though in a higher capacity, Solicitor General, than he was at the date of the events herein narrated. There was very little congenial society in Catbalogan when M.R. Harvey came there to help dispose of the criminal docket, and his advent was to me a very welcome oasis in a desert of the solitude of my own originality or lack of originality. On September 19th I had wired Vice Governor Rye that there were 172 prisoners in the jail, awaiting trial and many more coming. Of course no justice of the peace would be trusted to pass on whether an alleged outlaw should or should not be held for trial, if he were secretly in sympathy with the discomfiture American authority in Samar was having. He might let the man go, no matter what the proof. Also he might seek to clear himself of all suspicion in each case by committing men against whom there was no proof, thus unnecessarily crowding an already past filling provincial jail of limited dimensions, wherein Beriberi 440 was already making its dread appearance. So the writ of habeas corpus remained unsuspended, thus making it possible to so state in later official certificates covering that period. But habeas corpus had no more figure in the situation than it did at the Battle of Gettysburg, or at the crossing of the Red Sea by the chosen people, or at the sinking of the Titanic. The constabulary would worry along with such force as they had in the island of Samar, only a few hundred, certainly near 500 than 1,000, and whenever they had a battle with the outlaws, if they themselves were not annihilated, which happened more than once, they would bring back prisoners in droves and put them in the jail, and I was expected to sift out how much proof they had, or claimed to have, of overt acts by persons not actually captured. In action, of course a race then began, a race against death, to see whether death or I would get to John Doe or Richard Roe first, and though I held court every day except Sunday from August to November 8th, sometimes getting in 16 hours per day by supplementing a day's work with a night session, death would often beat me to some one man on the jail list whom I happened to have picked out to get in the next day. Men so picked out were men as to whom something I might have held out the hope of being able to dispose of the cases quickly by letting them loose. 441, thus getting that much farther from the danger limit of crowding in the jail. Some of these would be specially picked out because reported sick. I kept track of the sick by visiting them myself when practicable and talking to them. Of course many of them were brigands per legend, but some of them were the saddest looking, most abject little brigands that anybody ever saw. Of course you might catch some nasty disease from them, but nobody somehow ever seemed to have any apprehension on that score in the Philippines. This does not argue bravery at all. It is merely the listless stoicism that lurks in the climate. I recollect going to walk one afternoon after adjourning court at 5 o'clock, saying to the prosecuting attorney before adjourning, "We will take up the case of Captain's Coral in the morning." There does not seem, from what I can understand, to be enough proof to convict of anything. Of course, when you were dealing with hundreds of people, you did not have any nerve-wracking hysterics about any one man. Leaving the courthouse I passed by the hospital, where Capens had been transferred, pending the arrival of witnesses against him and the rest of the crowd captured. With him, I asked the hospital steward how Capens was. The answer was, he had died at 4:45. Some 20 minutes before, death had beat me to Capens when I meet Capens. He will know I did the best I could. I was under a great strain, a sort of writ of habeas corpus incarnate, the only thing remotely suggesting relief from unwarranted 442 detention on the whole horizon of the situation. I was trying to do the best I could by the Constitution, insofar as the spirit of it had reached the Philippines. I broke down totally under the strain. About November 8th, came home in the spring of the following year, and remained an invalid for several years thereafter. And as noted, Corporation lawyer once said after recovery from a similar illness, "I haven't had much constitution since, but have been living mostly under the bylaws." American office holding in the Philippines is not so popular with the Filipinos as to have moved them to any outburst of gratitude in the shape of an effort to create a pension system for Americans who lose their health in the government service out there. When they leave the islands, they become as one dead so far as the Philippine insular government is concerned, and the men whose health is more or less permanently impaired by disability incurred in line of duty in the Philippines are not and will never be numerous or powerful enough back home to create any sentiment in favor of a pension system for former Philippine employees, since the Philippine business is not a subject of much popular enthusiasm at best. So if I had not had private resources, the results of the Samar insurrection of 1904 would have left me also in the pitiable plight in which I have beheld so many of my repatriated former comrades of the Philippine service in the last 7 years, to whom the heart of the more fortunate ex-Filipino indeed goes out in sympathy, but to return to the race to be death to prisoners. In that grim and memorable fall of 1904, in September, the crowded condition of the jail had begun to tell on the inmates. The constabulary force at Catbalogan was quite inadequate for the varied emergencies of the situation, there being, besides, the town itself to protect, the provincial treasury to guard, the governor's office, the courthouse, and the jail. Consequently, the jail guard was too small. The jail buildings were in an enclosure a little larger than a baseball diamond, surrounded by high stone walls, but it was not safe to let the inmates sleep out in the enclosure at night. They had to be kept at night in the buildings. Any American who has visited the Central Penitentiary at Manila, called by Libid, has seen a place almost as clean as a battleship. This is American work, but the Filipinos are not trained in sanitary matters, and all they know about handling large crowds of prisoners they learned from the Spaniards. The governor was a native half-caste, a very excellent man, but free from that horror, which I think is an almost universal American trait, of seeing unnecessary and preventable sacrifice of human life, no matter whose the life. I inspected the jail as often as was practicable, and managed to keep down the death rate below what it might have been, the prisoners being allowed to go out in the open court during the day. They also had such medical attention as was available. However, during the last 5 or 6 weeks of that term of court, I would be pretty sure to find on my desk every 2 or 3 days, on opening court in the morning, a notice like this: Cárcel Provincial de Samar, I.F. Oficina del Alcaide. Catbalogan, Samar, I.F. 22 de Septiembre de 1904. Han, S.R. Justicia Instancia de esta provincia, Catbalogan, Samar, I.F. Señor. Tengo el honor de poner en conocimiento de juzgado, Q, and entre 12y1 de la Felicio el Procesado, Ramón Burros, a conciencia de la enfermedad de Burberry, que venía padeciendo. Lo que tengo el honor de comunicar en juzgado para su superior conocimiento. De muy respetuosamente, Gonzalo Lucero, alcaide de la cárcel provincial, which being interpreted means Provincial Jail of Samar, P.I. Catbalogan, Samar, P.I. September 22, 1904. His Honor, the Judge of First Instance of this province, Catbalogan, Samar, P.I. Sir, I have the honor to bring to the knowledge of the court that last night between 12 and 1 o'clock, the accused person Ramon Burros died in consequence of the disease of Burberry, from which he has been suffering. Which fact I have the honor to communicate to the court for its superior knowledge. Very respectfully, Gonzalo Lucero, Warden of the Provincial Jail. Now, a jail death rate of only 10 or 12 a month was not at all a bad record for an insurrection in a Philippine province. It would be rank demagoguery at this late day to be a party to anybody's getting excited about it. I was rather proud of it by comparison with the jail death rate of the Albay insurrection of the year before, where 120 men had died in the jail in about 6 months. But it began to get on one's nerves to have to expect a billet doux like the above on your desk. At the opening of court each day, when the accused person had no commitment trial and may have been wholly innocent, it all came back to the difference between war and peace. Viz. That in war, it is to be expected that many innocent persons will suffer, but that, in peace only the guilty should suffer. Moreover, in war that admits it is war, your agents, your army, are better able to handle crowds of prisoners than native police and constabulary, and the percentage of innocent who suffer with the guilty in such war will be far less. Whereas the contrary is true of war, waged by constabulary checked by courts, which pretends that a state of peace exists, i.e. which pretends there is no need for declaring martial law and calling on your army. It was this Samar insurrection which convinced me that waging war with courts and constabulary in no other recognized method was, in its net results, the coolest kind of war, and that the civil government of the Philippines was a failure insofar as regarded M.R. McKinley's original injunction to the Taft Commission, where, after alluding to the articles of capitulation of the city of Manila to our forces, which concluded with the words, "The city, its inhabitants and its private property of all descriptions are placed under the special safeguard of the faith and honor of the American Army," he added, "As high and sacred an obligation rests upon the government of the United States to give protection for property and life to all the people of the Philippine Islands, I charge this Commission to labor for the full performance of this obligation, which concerns the honor and conscience of their country." Commenting on this in his inaugural address as Governor of the Philippines, Governor Taft had said, "May we not be recreant to the charge, which he truly says, concerns the honor and conscience of our country." No matter who was to blame, here we were in Samar, with the 14th Infantry 3 hours away in one direction at Calbayog, doing nothing, and the 18th Infantry 5 hours away in another direction, at Tacloban, doing nothing, and a reign of terror going on in Samar, with the peacefully inclined people of the lowlands and coast towns appealing to us for protection and not getting it, sometimes crouching in abject terror without knowing which way to fly, sometimes taking to the hills and joining the outlaws as a measure of self-preservation. 'Twas pitiful, wondrous pitiful. I then and there decided that we ought to get out of the Philippines as soon as any decent sort of a native government could be set up, and that our republic was not adapted to colonization. In his North American Review article above cited, in denying that the unwillingness of the Manila government to order out the army in Samar in the fall of 1904 had anything to do with the possible effects so doing might have had on the presidential election then in progress in the United States, Governor Ide rebuked me with patronizing self-righteousness. Thus was Judge Blount opposed to colonists. He means in giving the Filipinos, under such circumstances, the protection of civil government, instead of ordering out the army. No, but I was opposed to using a saw in lieu of a lancet in excising the ulcers of that body politic at that time, in protesting that there was nothing sinister about the failure to use the troops. Judge I cunningly wonders whether my attitude was subsequently assumed after I left the island because of proclivities as an emperor, or whether it was merely due to predilections in favor of military rule. Read M.R. McKinley's instructions to the Taft Commission, above quoted, that to protect life and property concern the honor and conscience of their country, and consider if the suggestion does not seem to hide its hand and sling away in shame before the strong clear light of what was then upon duty. As a matter of fact, Judge Charles S. Loebner, who is still with the Philippine judiciary, visited me en route to another point during that Samar term of court, and he will recall, should he ever chance upon this book in this chapter, with what vehemence I said to him at the time. In effect, Judge, we belong in the Western Hemisphere. We have no business out here, permanently, if proclivities and predilections in favor of affording decent protection to the lives and property of defenseless people, by properly garrisoning their towns constitute lack of kindness, then the rebuke was well taken. These details are not related with Herculean gravity in order to acquaint the reader with my utterances as being important per se, but it is important to make clear to the reader, and he is entitled, in all frankness, to have it made clear by one who has known so long, detained his attention on this great subject, to To know just voila, light from heaven on the road to Damascus broke upon this witness, and how and why he came to be in favor of Philippine independence, because the reasons which convinced him may seem good in his sight. Of the reader also, if the man who reads this book shall see that, the man who wrote it was, in Samar in 1904, neither a Republican nor a Democrat, but simply an American in a far distant land, jealous of the honor of his country's flag in its capacity as a symbol of protection to those over whom it floated, then the work will not have been written in vain. The presidentes or leaders of the various pueblos were in session at Catbalogan in semi-annual convention during the first few days of October 1904, when the Assistant Attorney General, M.R. Harvey, visited Catbalogan. M.R. Harvey and the writer had taken a number of long walks together in the suburbs of Catbalogan, though Major Dave, commanding the Samar Constabulary, an officer of the regular army, had warned us it was not safe outside of town. We had talked over the situation fully. Besides all its other aspects, there were a number of American women in Catbalogan, an American lawyer's wife, the wife of the superintendent of school, her sister, and others. It was not at all likely that the Pelagians would enter Catbalogan, but there was always the possibility, not to be wholly known, that some such episode as that of March 23rd of the preceding year, at Sirigay, already described, might be repeated, as hereinbefore noted. On August 9, the Pelagians had done some killing and burning at Salanga, less than 10 miles north of Catbalogan, and likewise at Maudiing, less than 10 miles south of Catbalogan, on September 1st, and on the evening of September 2nd, about 7:30, there had been a false alarm caused by some native of Catbalogan running down the main
Seemed
street
like I
yelling,
should have been on the board. I
Pelagians,
took out a bunch more.
Pelagians. All of which did not tend to make you feel that your American women were quite as entirely safe from harm as they ought to be. In the course of one of our walks in Mar, Harvey and I had
Well, it's all
stopped on
recorded.
the mountainside overlooking Catbalogan to
Take a
catch our
look,
breath and
folks.
take in
See
the
what
view
you
of the
got.
town below and the sea beyond. I said to him, because I knew his mind also was on the one great need of the hour. Yes, sir, if President Roosevelt were here and could see the situation as we do, he would order out the army and protect these defenseless people, no matter which way the chips might fly. M.R. Harvey agreed with me. He promised to go back to Manila and tell the authorities there. So, after we came back to town, we were advised at the convention of Presidentes desired to have M.R. Harvey favor them with an address. He said, "What shall I tell them?" I said, "Tell them that if they will do their duty by the American government will do its duty by them." He spoke Spanish fluently, made a good speech, and told them in effect just that thing. Then he went back to Manila, and shortly afterward wrote me the 2 letters which follow. Department of Justice, Philippine Islands, Office of the Assistant Attorney General, for the Constabulary. Manila, P.I. October 15, 1904. My dear Judge, we arrived in Manila on Tuesday morning,
Oh, you
the
mad?
11th
You
instant,
killed me,
and
bro.
I prepared my report and submitted it to the Attorney General on the 12th. In the meantime, making a transcript of your summary and delivering a copy of same with other information to the Attorney General along with my report. After dictating the report and before delivering it, I had a conversation with General Allen on the situation in Samar and told him what my recommendations would be. He agreed that rewards should be offered for the capture of Pablo Villar, Antonio Onoger, and Pedro Los Cruz, but took issue on the other recommendations, and to my mind he takes a very extreme view. But I thought as the president, stressing that he wanted to bring me down in my feelings in that matter. I think the real cause for his opposition is the effect that he fears an aggressive attitude might have on the presidential election. In other words, whatever they do aggressively might be misconstrued in media such as political capital. At Governor Wright's request, I got the report from the Attorney General before he was and the government made the report to me most of the dates that I submitted with the report, including your summary, and, while he did not say much, what he did say convinced me that there would be something doing if it were not on the eve of election, and in my opinion there will be things doing in Samar within 30 days. I enclose here with a copy of your summary, and also a copy of my report to the Attorney General. On the 18th instant I received your telegram to hold the completion of your summary until receipt of a letter mailed by you that day. I telegraphed you in reply that my report and your summary were placed in the hands of the Attorney General on the 12th instant. If there is any additional data in your letter mailed on the 13th, I will submit it to the proper authorities. For the lack of time, I will close and write more next time. Very truly yours, signed, G.O.R. Harvey, Assistant Attorney General, Department of Justice, Philippine Islands, Office of the Assistant Attorney General, for the Constabulary. Manila, P.I. October 19, 1904. My dear Judge Blount, since mailing my letter to you of last Saturday, I have found the copies of your summary on the situation in Samar and enclosed to herewith, in accordance with my promise. This week we have received some good news from Samar with reference to important captures and killings of Pelagans. I am not in touch with what is going on with reference to Samar, and can give you no information along that line. As I remember, the governor told me the other day when I was talking with him, that one more company of scouts will be sent down right away. I sincerely hope the situation is improving, and that you are getting along rapidly in disposing of the large docket before you. If there is not a very great improvement in the situation, by the 9th of November, I think there will be a considerable movement of troops in Samar within 30 days, for the good of the government. I hope the situation will improve materially before that time. I would like to see them put the troops there right now. I am of the opinion that it would not affect the election a half-dozen votes, and it might save 2 or 3 or a half-dozen massacres and the destruction of much property. With best wishes for your success in your work, and with regards to M.R. Block, I am very truly yours, G.O.R. Harvey, Assistant Attorney General, Philippines Constabulary, to Hun James H. Blount, Judge of First Instance, Catalogan, Samar, P.I. These 2 letters may be found at p. 2532, Congressional Record, February 25, 1908, where they were the subject of remark in the House of Representatives by Hun Thomas W. Hardwick of Georgia, apropos of Governor Ike's North American Review article of December 1907. A few weeks after the presidential election, I saw M.R. Harvey in Manila. We naturally talked about Samar and his 2 letters. To me, the troops had then been ordered out. He referred to his conference with the Governor General and stated, yes, he told me, that was the reason, meaning that the reason for not ordering out the troops was the one assigned in his, Harvey's, letter to me, viz., whatever we do aggressively might be misconstrued and made use of as political capital. On October 18, 1904, there was received at Manila the following cablegram concerning the presidential campaign in the United States. New York, 16. Judge Parker, in addressing campaign clubs at Isapas the past week, returned to the subject of the Philippines, in the evident hope of making it a paramount issue of the campaign. He repeated his former declaration that the retention of the Philippines and the carrying out of the policy of the Republican administration had cost $650 million and 200,000 lives. Secretary of War Taft, in addressing a mass meeting held in Baltimore Saturday night, ridiculed Judge Parker's statement and characterized his figures as alarmist. Of course, Judge Parker's figures were rather high, of which more anon. He was not going to miss anything in the way of a chance of getting a rise out of the administration by understatement, but some statement from the Philippines at once became a supremely important desideratum to counterbalance Judge Parker's overstatement. Some optimism to meet the Parker pessimism, encouraged by the public interest aroused by the figures furnished him, and the consequent apparent uneasiness it created in the enemy's camp. Judge Parker soon had the whole Philippine group of islands going to the damnation bow-wows. On October 20th, Secretary of War Taft cabled Governor Wright, then Governor General of the islands, a long telegram, quoting Judge Parker as having used, among other language descriptive of the beatitudes we had conferred on our little brown brother, the following: the towns in many places in ruins, whole districts in the hands of ladrones, 443. At that time the whole archipelago was absolutely quiet for the nuns, except Samar. Samar was the only island where Judge Parker's statement was true, and as to Samar, it was absolutely true. On October 23, Governor Wright wired Secretary of War Taft as follows. There is nothing warranting the statement that towns are in ruins. It is not true that there are whole districts in the hands of ladrones. Life and property are as safe here as in the United States. 444. This was followed by a perfectly true and correct picture of the peace and quiet which then prevailed for the time being everywhere throughout the archipelago, except in Samar, which dark and bloody, all was specifically accepted. Then followed a statement as to Samar, full of illusions as elaborately optimistic as any of the Taft cablegrams of 1900, to impliedly inconsiderable prowling bands of outlaws in Samar. Of course nobody at home knew the answer to this, so it silenced the Parker batteries, and the Samar massacres proceeded, unchecked. Meanwhile the 14th Infantry at Calbayog, Samar, and the 18th Infantry at Tacloban, late, smiled with astute, if contemptuous, tolerance, at the self-inflicted impotence of a republic trying to make conquered subjects behave without colliding too violently with home sentiment against having conquered subjects. Sang your favorite Barrack song. He may be a brother of W.M.H. Taft, but he ain't no friend of mine. And continued to enjoy enforced leisure. They did chafe under the restraint, but it at least relieved them from the not altogether inspiring task of chasing Pelagans through jungles and along the slippery mire of precipitous mountain trails, and at the same time permitted the second lieutenant among them to swear fierce, blaze oaths, not wholly unjustified, about how much better he could run the islands than they were being run. On October 26th, I wired Governor Wright at Manila as follows. Since my letter of October 6th, situation appears worse. Additional depredations both on east and west coast. Smith Bell closing out. 445. Reliable American residing in Wright says that during week ending last Sunday 13 families living along river Nagbac, barrio of Tutubigan, said Pueblo, kidnapped by brigands and carried off to Ills. This means some 60 people having farms along river rice ready to be harvested. 7 of the 11 barrios of Wright have been burned. Blount. When I sent that telegram of October 26th, the situation in the Pueblo of Wright was typical of the reign of terror throughout the island. Wright could have been reached by the 18th Infantry, then over at Tacloban, inlaid, and garrisoned on 8 hours' notice. But I had little hope that the telegram would stir the 18th. The best man I had ever personally known in the high station was at the head of the government of the island. And as he was my friend, I sat down to think the situation out, determine, with a pretty research, is the privilege of friendship, to analyze the supreme apathy, and to investigate how many times 13 families having farms along river, once ready to be harvested would have to be carried off to the hills by the brigands in order to move the 18th Infantry before the presidential election. Then I wondered just how many seconds it would have taken the British Governor General, backed by unanimous home sentiment concerning the wisdom of having colonies, to have acted had a great British colonial mercantile house like Smith, Bell and Company appeal to him for protection of its interests, and that brought me there on the tie ribs of earth, as Kipling would phrase it, to the fundamentals of the problem, the British imperial idea of which Kipling is the voice and Benjamin Piddy Companist is based, superficially, upon the supposed necessity for the control of the tropics by non-tropical peoples, though fundamentally, it is an assertion of the right of any people to assume control of the land and destinies of another when they feel sure they can govern that other better than that other can govern itself. Is this proposition tenable, and if so, within what limits? Is it tenable to the point of total elimination of the people sought to be improved? If not, then how far? How far is incidental sacrifice of human life negligible in the working out of the broader problem of the greatest good of the greatest number? In the article in the North American Review for December 1907, Governor Ide makes exhaustive answer to the doctors who for some months past, in the columns of the North American Review and elsewhere, have established prescription for curing the ills of the Filipino people, including Senator Francis G. Mullins, William J. Bryan, and brother. In the course of this version of the fact last mentioned, Governor Wright gets on rather high horse, asking, with much dignified indignation, how many people in the United States would have known or cared whether the army was or was not ordered out in Samar in 1904? I concede that the solicitude was a super solicitude, as do the Harvey letters, but like them, I must recognize its reality. However, when Governor Wright reaches his rhapsody of conscious virtue, it is inconceivable that the Commission could have been animated by the base and ignoble partisan prejudices that's charged against him, capping his climax by triumphantly pointing out that Governor General Wright was a lifelong Democrat. He doth protest too much, for the angelic opinions he thus attaches to himself are at once rudely snapped by the reflection by the very short while after the article came out. In the North American Review, Governor Wright became Secretary of War in President Roosevelt's cabinet, and a little later took the stump for Taft and Sherman. In 1908, Governor Wright did not stoop to deny or extenuate his share in the matter, and I honor him for it. 446. But to stick to your own crowd and then deny afterwards that you did so, that is another story. However, let us brush aside such petty attempts to cloud the real issue, which is, how many people would Governor Wright and Vice Governor Wright have permitted to be massacred by the Pelagians in Samar in 1904 before they could have ordered out the military prior to the presidential election? Let us consider the case, not with a view of clouding the issue, but of clearing it. The truth is, Governor Wright was very gravely concerned about the Samar situation from August to November 1904. Of course, it is due to him to make perfectly clear that he did not realize the gravity of that situation as vividly as those of us who were on the ground in Samar, 400 or 500 miles away, but the information hereinbefore reviewed, conveyed to him by the provincial governor, I.M.R. Harvey, the Assistant Attorney General sent to Samar for the express purpose of getting the Manila government in possession of the exact situation, and by myself, was certainly sufficient to make them chargeable with knowledge of all that happened thereafter, certainly chargeable with knowledge of all that had happened theretofore. Of course there was General Allen, the Commander-in-Chief of the Constabulary, at Manila, presumably speaking well of his command, the writer of the civil government, presumably giving industrious and tactful aid and comfort to the idea that the authorities could afford to worry, along with the constabulary alone until after the presidential election, but that could not discount the actual facts reported from the afflicted province by the officials on the ground. General Allen, it should be noted, remained in Manila all this time, so that any Otis-like situation while at hand bouquets he may have thrown at his subordinates in Samar, and the situation there generally, were mere political hothouse products, sure to be recognized as such by the sure kindliness of the truly considerable man at the head of the government than by most anyone else he could hand them out to. That man knew, to all intents and purposes, in the great and noble heart of him, what was really going on in Samar. He knew that massacres had been occurring, and that they were likely to keep on occurring. In other words, he knew that preventable sacrifice of life of defenseless people was going on, and that he could put a stop to it anytime he saw fit. The question he had to wrestle with was, should he stop it? Knowing the hellfire in the democratic orders in the United States would at once lyrically describe as filthiness in the Philippines. I insist that there is no use for any holier than thou gentlemen to be confused with any flow of indignant conscious rectitude based on the premises we are considering. Better to look a little deeper on the idea that you are observing your republic in flagrante colonizatione with as good a men as you ever have had, or ever will have, among you, as the principal actor, Governor Wright's course was entirely right. If the Philippine policy was right, if his course was not right, it was not right because the Philippine policy is fundamentally wrong. Governor Wright of course believed that the Philippine policy was right. I myself did not quite find it. It was wrong until it was revealed in all its rawness by the period now under discussion. Of course, the governor did not vividly realize that the American women in Catalogan were not entirely safe. If he had, he would have registered politics or no politics. But native life was politically negligible. What difference would a few score, or even a few hundred, natives of Samar make, compared with the pandemonium of anarchy and bloodshed all over the archipelago, which Messrs. Taft, Wright, and I have long been insisting would follow Philippine independence? Was the whole future of 8 million of people to be jeopardized to save a few people in Samar? That was the moral question of the Indian government in its last analysis, and the government faced the proposition slowly and answered no. I will go farther than this. If I had believed, with Messrs. Taft, Wright, and I'd, that Philippine independence meant anarchy in the islands, and the orthodox bloody welter of chaos, I too might have hesitated to order out the troops on the eve of the election, and my hesitation, like theirs, might have continued until the election was safely over. So might yours, reader. Don't be so certain you would not. Practically absolute power, sure of its own benevolence, has temptations to withhold its confidence from the people that you want not of. Don't condemn Governor Wright, condemn the policy, and change your republic back to the course set by its founders. Give the Philippine people the independence they right ought to have, instead of secretly hoping to unload them on somebody else, through the medium of your next great war. The question of whether the troops should have been ordered out, or not at the time above dealt with is by no means without two sides. On the bloody welter side, you have the well-known opinions of Messrs. Taft, Wright, and I'd. On the other side you have before you, for the moment, only my little opinion, so instead of having in Governor Wright a Bluebeard, you simply have a man of great personal probity and unflinching moral courage, following his convictions to their ultimate logical conclusion without shadow of turning in the act of colonization. In other words, Mr. American, you see yourself as others see you, so face the music and look at yourself. In your colony business, you are a house divided against itself, which cannot stand. On the other hand, I knew the Filipino people far more intimately than either Mr. Taft, Governor Wright, or Judge Ide. I spoke their language, which they did not. I had met them both in peace and in war, which they had not. I had held court for months at a time in various provinces of the archipelago, from extreme northern Luzon to Mindanao, which they had not. I had met the Filipinos in their homes for years on terms of free and informal intercourse impracticable for any governor-general. It was therefore perfectly natural that I should know them better than any of these eminent gentlemen. I was not prepared to be in a hurry about recommending myself out of office by assenting that our guardianship over the Filipinos should at once be terminated, but I knew there was nothing to the bloody welter proposition. The home life of the Filipino is too altogether a model of freedom from discord, pervaded as it is by parental, filial, and fraternal love, and their patriotism is too universal and genuine to give the bloody welter bugaboo any standing in court. But whosoever questions for one moment Governor Wright's high personal character simply does not know the man. To do so, moreover, would fatally cloud the issue I have sought to make clear between his view of the duty of our government and my own. In his moods that reminded one of Lincoln, Governor Wright used to say, "Don't shoot the organist, he's doing the best he can." It is true that his answer to Judge Parker was not a full and frank statement of the case, but did it lie in American human nature, when your antagonist was recklessly overstating the case in the heat of debate on the eve of a presidential election, to take him into your confidence and tell him all you knew, in simple trusting faith that he would thereafter quit exaggerating? To permit the dispute to boil down to the real issue, viz. How many lives it was permissible to abandon on the greatest good to the greatest number theory, would obviously jeopardize the existence of the government which the governor of the Philippines naturally believed to be better for all concerned than any other. And there is your cul-de-sac, Hindley left for me. We can point with pride to many things